Good evening, and welcome to Salon 5, a production of One Week Critique, a nonprofit digital editing studio which aims to provide literary education and pedagogical support to writers, whatever genre they're operating in, whatever their level of formal education, and regardless of the means by which they have found themselves compelled toward the literary arts. I'm Jon Riccio, joined tonight by our featured readers, Hannah Seelman and Sara Mae, as well as One Week Critique's founding editors, Matthew Schmitz and Adam El-Sergani. Thank you to everyone in attendance. As a quick reminder, please make sure you're muted while our artists have the floor. And we hope you'll stick around after Hannah and Sarah's reading for a brief question and answer session regarding their creative approaches. I know you're just as excited as we are to hear Hannah and Sarah's poems. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our first reader. Hannah Seelman lives in Michigan and is currently a student earning her MFA focused in poetry while teaching writing composition at Western Michigan University. She enjoys writing about the human mind mixed with natural imagery and is inspired by the power of reaching a message to an audience. She has been published in literary magazines, including Ink Nest Poetry, Feminist Wire, Thistle Magazine, Poet's Choice, and has been a finalist for the Wingless Dreamer competition. Her first book, Milk, Mess, and Magic, will be available for purchase tentatively right before Mother's Day this spring. She enjoys visiting the UP, participating in martial arts, spending time with her goofy family, and of course, writing. Hannah, the poetry is all yours.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to have you all here. Okay. So, I wrote my first book when I realized after having my daughter that being a parent is hard. Believe it or not, there is a stigma about parents having to feel like they're always in tune with their children, feel like they they can't be honest with each other. And so I wrote this book to show what it's like to struggle in parenthood, and to show the beauty of it as well. To try and reach an audience where it can be very, very lonely when you're having low days as a parent. And so reaching out in that way, through sharing experiences, I think could help some people. And so that's why I'm excited about my book. But I will read you some poems. So, some days. I am the bleak sky and cold. Self-doubt is responsible for my shivering. My chest shudders. Can I even do this? I dread when my baby wakes up and only want to scroll TikTok for hours. But I'm having lunch with friends today, so I pack up baby, slap on a jack-o'-lantern face, and I laugh, and I look fresh, and I say my baby is bliss, and all my friends say the same about theirs. After lunch, we hug, then go back home, where loneliness resides besides doubt, and our freezing hearts cry. We could be a blanket for one another, but we're too damn proud to admit we're cold. Thank you. Okay. This one is called Big Emotions. I wanted to punch a kid today, right in the throat. I didn't, though. My daughter said hi enthusiastically as he went down the slide. He ignored her, or maybe he didn't hear her, before trotting off. My daughter's face dulled sadly, a bit of glimmer lost, but soon reignited as a butterfly rested on a nearby daisy. Yellow wings pulsing in black patterns, a monarch, her favorite. I almost committed a crime today, but I stopped myself, barely. Okay. This one is titled Shimmering Notes. The first time, Mama, came from your lips, the sun beamed in a song I haven't heard in years. And when the shimmering notes flooded within me, I couldn't help but smile. So throughout the book, there are little parts of poems telling the story about how, like a little girl, my daughter, caught a dragon, a baby dragon from the sky. And what this is it's almost like a metaphor of me stepping back and looking at how my daughter is interacting with animals in real life and other children, and how I'm learning how to parent through her. But then I used the magic of dragon to help make it interesting and to help focus in on, I don't want to say the magic of parenthood because that's very cliche, but just kind of like the magic in like a child's eyes, like anything for them is possible. So naturally she would catch a dragon. All right, so they're spread out. It tells a story, the first one of the girl catching the dragon, and then the other three is of the mother watching her child interact with the dragon and trying to relate that back to her own parenthood. And then the last one is when the mother stops questioning, stops overthinking, and she goes out to just play with her children and their pet dragon. So this is the first one. I did not expect to see a tumbling mass crudely falling from the sky, that my youngest daughter would drop her sidewalk chalk and run across the yard to catch it before hitting the lawn. She held that feeble baby dragon cupped in her palm while it hid his aqua and gold-gemmed face beneath her right thumb. After not finding a single adult dragon lurking anywhere, she decided to adopt the baby, so she brought him inside, sat on the couch comforting him. It's okay, little buddy. I'll make you feel better. She built him a blanket nest. He gave a soft growl as he laid down, smoke gently curling from his nostrils. As I watched her stroke his brow, I wondered what it would feel like to hold such a full heart. So that was when we introduced the dragon. All right. This one is titled Balanced Sky. I never knew I was missing a moon until one night, rocking my baby beneath its glow, her eyes locked on mine, dazzling. There and then I decided to be a sun for her, and I made my soul tender as tulips, my voice gentle as dusk, my heart steady as morning light, and I found the fullness of a quiet moon. Okay. This one is called Wolf-Eyed. It's it takes on this the emotion of having a very outgoing child, and how the personality is difficult, and it would be easy to yell and try to subdue that personality, try to break them in a sense. But if you stick with it and you nurture it, this person is going to become very, very powerful. So this is called Wolf-Eyed. Look at the wolves running in her eyes. Look how their claws press off sharp rock, leaping, soaring. They are beautiful. They are holy, but sometimes they are too much. Pay attention to the wolves, sprinting through forests, playfully rolling on gray-black backs. They are elegant and freeing and sacred. Yet sometimes you want to tame their wild ways, to make them sit and stay, but you don't. Because even when they're uncontrolled and you're frustrated to tears, you know if endured, your wolf-eyed daughter will lead packs howling. To those with sons, I hope when Let It Go pops up on Spotify, you don't tell him to change the song, but dance alongside him in the family room. And when he chooses girl clothes instead of truck shirts, you say he looks super cool in his sunflower sweatshirt. And when he expresses something besides humor or anger, you tell him to open up more often, never demanding him to man up. And when he tells you that others hate him without knowing him, you pick up your sword and join his fight because he is your son. Let's see. Let's do unicorn. Okay. If you are a parent, you will understand this poem. And if you are not a parent, you will also understand it, but not to the extent of a parent. Unicorn. At home, my daughter is a baby unicorn, radiant, gentle, full of affection. But when the stars align and hunger takes hold, she transforms into a full-grown unicorn, her sharpened horn a subtle warning. She's still endearing, yet slightly formidable. When collision collides with hunger, she remains a unicorn, but now the daggered horn pairs of slick talons. If hunger, fatigue, and thirst intertwine, she becomes a restless creature, summoned from another realm, stands dagger-horned, knife-taloned, foaming at the mouth. Always bring snacks for your kids, always. All right, probably have time for one more? Two more? Okay, cool. I would say, let's do this one. To those with daughters, I hope when she cusses, you don't tell her to be a lady, but laugh because she learned it from you. And when she chooses boy clothes instead of pink frills, you tell her she looks amazing in that red truck shirt. And when she is strong, when she is fierce, you tell her to lean into it, not quiet down. And when she refuses the damsel's role, choosing instead to be her hero, you remember how capable she is. So you give her armor, swords, and a promise that she can always come home. All right, so this is my last one. So this is the end of the Dragon poem series. And so this is the last poem in the book. Catching Dragon, Part 5. After days of rain, I kicked my kids out to play. Outside, our napping dragon rolled on his back. I could hear him sigh like muted thunder rolling in. I heard sweet shouting and looked out to find my kids on the dragon's claw doing yoga. One in pigeon pose, another palm tree, and the last impressively in crow. The dragon snored, making them all lose their balance and fall laughing. I then went outside to show them how to properly balance on their heads. All right.
All right, Hannah on the dragon's claw doing yoga. That is awesome. Thank you, thank you. Let's give a big round of
Yeah.
applause to Hannah.
Thank you.
And before we hear from Sarah, my good friend Adam has a quick note.
Cool. Hi, everybody. I am Adam Al-Sergani. I am the executive director of One Week Critique. Uh, our board president, co-founder Matthew Schmidt is here, as John mentioned. Shout out to him and all the hard work he does, and especially shout out to John for finding some really fantastic readers tonight, and for doing the bulk of the work of putting this salon together. So thank you, John. Um, I someday I'm hoping to convince Zoom to like have little like poet snap and like affirmative grunt sounds and stuff for this odd moment in Zoom's uh where we're quietly enthusiastic. Um, but no, One Week Critique, as John mentioned, is a nonprofit editing studio. We have been a nonprofit for 5 years, and for in We've been in operation for nearly six. You can find us at oneweekcritique.com, including all of the many and sundry activities that we do in the writing community. We're an entirely volunteer-run organization. So when John puts together a salon like this, he's putting his own time in, and we're super, super grateful for that. If you want to help support us, you can certainly do so through the website. We are 501(c)(3), so it may be a tax-deductible donation. But just to make some very quick notes on some of the other things we do, we were named for our original project, which was an attempt to help those who didn't have time or had already exited MFA programs and other like organizations who still wanted feedback on work. That for a nominal donation, we would review a poem or a short piece and return it in a week or less. John also does teaching takeaways, which are lesson plans for teaching individual poems, which include generative prompts based on those poems. Matthew runs um, uh, it's one of those moments where my mind went blank. Um, uh,
Story talk.
well, he runs Story Talk, which is a podcast on short stories, as well as My Brain is Shot, an interview series about literary magazines. Um, and we also have our interview series, which looks at early and late drafts of um, of various pieces of published work. Those are also available to teachers in their early draft and their final or published draft to show comparisons as editing exercises to your students. We run weekly workshops at the Iowa City Public Library that are for teens. If you know some teens in Johnson County, Iowa, who want to join us at 4 o'clock on Thursdays, they are always welcome. Um, anyway, now that I have proven that my brain isn't fully functional, and I have made all those notes, thank you all for coming. You all help make this possible not only through donations, but through being enthusiastic about what we do, and helping us do cool things. So rather than hear me prattle, let's get on to the cool things of Sarah.
Thank you so much, Adam. And I have Sarah's bio here, but I did want to say what I love about looking into this Zoom audience. I'm seeing so many connections we've had either through Western Michigan University with graduate students and undergraduates alike, or people who I know I met Adam and Matthew in my MFA program, and that goes back to the 2010s. And even within the parameters of one week critique, we've had articles on Alan's poetry, on a poem Catherine wrote. Catherine's been featured on the interview series. Ori's been featured on the interview series. Charles Kell. And I do love how we all show up for each other. And way to go, poets. Sara Mae is a genderqueer writer raised on the Chesapeake Bay. Their work examines the surreal, the uncanny, body horror, and intimacy. They are a 2025 SAFTA Artist in Residence, 2023 Big Ears Music Festival Artist Scholar, and a 2022 and 2026 Tin House Workshops attendee. Their work appears in Aura's forthcoming From Poetry, the Georgia Review, Muzzle, Fairy Tale Review, and elsewhere. Their second chapbook, Phantasma Gossip, won the Vinyl 45 chapbook competition and was released from Yes Yes Books in spring 2025. They received their MFA from University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and they write bedroom pop as The Noisy and currently live in Philly. Sarah.
Thank you. Um, I'm learning so much about this community of writers just from this one online event, and I feel very lucky to be here and like be a part of all these connections. So thank you for having me. And I loved hearing Hannah's poem so much and learning about your kiddo through your work. So yeah, honored to share this bill with you. Okay, I went to the other room to get, so this is a John Waters artifact that led to the poem that I'll just get that out of the way. I'll read the John Waters poem, but this is a like bingo card and it's like a scratch and sniff. So this was released in theaters with the movie Polyester when it came out. So you'd scratch each one and it would have a different smell. And so I wrote a poem that's formatted that way, and each one is like corresponding to a different smell. So I'll read that. And it's called Bottled Bride. Man, I have not opened this in a second. Here it is. Okay. And it's on the fun fold out page. Bottled Bride. On graduation day, I ran in the rain toward my high school sweetheart, wearing white, my hair dyed purple. In his 90s Toyota, we drove to the house where Polyester was filmed, the Dreamlanders and their queer stink, what I lied about in myself. We sat in the sunroom, drinking beer from glass bottles, picking at labels. I watched older girls laugh and I mirrored it. In that cul-de-sac for graduation parties, I found the ghost of the reel of Edith Massey's pleated skirt, floral wallpaper backdrop to Francine Fishpaw's sobs. Odorama was a scratch and sniff gimmick they distributed in theaters, a bingo card of smells. A hand curled towards me. I smoked weed my first time with him, laid my head on cold asphalt and thought about pregnant women, their hands sparkling on their stomachs, wedding rings. My back against the stove at the party, nodding, performing, uncertainty like suspense in my body, shapeless dread inhabiting me. I totaled my car the day I turned 18, the day I dyed my hair purple. You have to wait to wash bright colors. For days, I smelled like airbag powder. It came time to leave the house. I was sad to go to that sweetheart's bed. Bleak green lighting. I was gone from my body, already reframing. Where Divine's tears, telephone coiled on screen, I hid to breathe, all that smiling, the stain on my white dress, dabbing. Okay, that's that one. This next one is called Moonroof Gothic. In temporal drag, I press a blade of grass to my palm and call backwards. This time, I do not return, but bring that small child out from hiding. Our voice bouncing off plastic gems, fairy wings, a frivolousness where we can hear each other, materiality a balm, the distance of a wound from end to end, and how it puckers, a closed distance, an echolocation. I had a dream I made myself shiny, so a crow would fly down and peck at me. He tapped my neck like a spigot for syrup from bark, and I marveled at the sensation, a new pulse, a gray sky above us. In my romantic latency, unless you consider shower thoughts a practice of ultrasonic hearing, I think only of breathing into each other's mouths, my melodrama, my sexual fantasy, me the window, and you the condensation, you the chimney, and me sky catching smoke. I shed my Victorian collar for icebox skin, fruit bat gossip, collection of blue butterflies and baby teeth, how I call on the self who was afraid to want, who slept in a closet and woke up to a figure the shape of purple television static, the one scared of hallways, the sound of the bath running, the way a house articulates itself, the triangulation of my desires, the shape of a roof. Yippee. Okay. I've been having these like really wonderful email exchanges with John, and it's been making me think about surrealism more. Like so many of these poems came from studying the surrealists and just like looking at their art and just like thinking about Leonora Carrington and Remedios Varo and all their like fantastical like fairy tale images. So I have a couple of Exquisite Corpse poems in here, which is like a game that the Surrealists would play. So I wanted to read a couple for this. I'm thinking, yeah, okay, we'll do Exquisite Corpse as Cootie Catcher because it's fun and it is formatted like a, hold on, the lines are so, okay. It's formatted like a cootie catcher, yes. Exquisite Corpse as Cootie Catcher. Pink cotton candy bedroom walls, I think of angels, I hemstitch. Pink like the inside of your lady apple, fruit of your toothy kiss tutelage. School colors like condiments, jerseys that smell of vodka and pissing in basements. School colors like condiments, as in my blood runs like a track star down to my ankle socks. Blue decayed skin peel, I exfoliate, I exhume an ex's love note. Blue paint swatches when you cut the proverbial cake. Dirty is the color of the secret places where I bury you in my mouth. Dirty girls get the worm, and the birds cry virginally. I have one that's cut out, and when I do like readings, I make people like pick a color, and then I'm like with a complete stranger being like, let me read you this dirty poem right to your face. Okay. So this is a little nicer. We all get a healthy distance from one another. Okay. I'll do Exquisite Corpse as Recurring Dream. And let me see. Okay, great. Great. Exquisite Corpse as Recurring Dream. To be fuckable is to be of linearity. Lipstick left to right. Letters stuffed with violets. Perfume, then spit. Linearity, my fidelity. Bouquets like salts over the shoulder. Walking the aisle in chronological order. But I was a backwards angel. I stayed with you. My sleep paralysis returned, shoehorned wife, sickle, knife. Nights I woke up crying. Who was the succubus? Did I become her? A myclonic jerk before dreams. What sent me to sleep? What did she smell like in this bed where you brought me sesame cookies? If I was the monster, if I am, show me my seams. I wore my best hope that summer. Even Madonnas perch on serpents, magnolias let loose from their faucets, calves in the newspaper of a day's outfits. To be fuckable means to be cherubic ad nauseum. I was an angel wrung dry, a cherry stem fairy ring, a mouth to look through, and linearity demands closure. My heart could not throw back its curtains. To let you go would be an infidelity. Tell me, what did she smell like in this bed where you brought me sesame cookies? Whew. Okay. One or two, how do I have time for one or two more? Two. Period. Okay. I don't normally read this one out loud, but it feels like I must because it's my poem that was in Fairy Tale Review. So this is very exciting. This is called You Are Leaving a Trail of Bodies Behind You. And I am going to provide context because I think I feel self-conscious if I don't. But it's, I think there is this idea, there's this sort of narrative of dangerousness that's like placed upon you when you are socialized as a woman and you act out the desires that you like actually want to have. Like you're told that like you're a dangerous person. And so this is sort of like responding to and grappling with like, am I a dangerous person? What does it mean if I'm a dangerous person? And someone had said something to me about you're leaving a trail of bodies behind you about my dating history. So, which is just an unkind thing to say. So, you are leaving a trail of bodies behind you, he says, on our back porch that year of breadcrumbs, genders of water, all my square pegged boyfriends, a Hansel, Gretel, witch grammar. I turn back and place a daisy in each eye socket until it is a daisy chain, until I've made a series of vases to outgrow, the bodies grown over, my grass unmowed. Say in me lives a boy, a girl, a witch. As I push, I am also reaching for who? Heart hammering without a home to nail into. Say I sing in the language of aubergine buds, a velvet vessel, an A-frame halo. He was wrong about the bodies, my chrysalides. The boys did not need me, and I needed only a memento mori, a hunger for living. A closet is a cemetery only for my gowns. I wore them to nights like this, beneath a canopy of fireflies, whiskey, telling the story as if I was not pruning more and more parts of me into the hearth, a forest of bleeding hearts, if I pushed one in to protect myself. What spells do I shame into corsets, into jars, and bury and bury? Okay. And the last one I'll read, thank you, is, let me make sure I have it open. Okay. This is called The Birth of Venus. For the tides, barnacles open their throats to drink or close the door to brood in their own wetness. Barnacles ruin hydrodynamics. They are expensive and insist on slowness. Venus is a mythology of vegetation, fertility, that we come to shore ripe. Beneath Botticelli's scallop shell, compact mirror, teenage girl hand imitating the chatter of some boyfriend, a fist opening and closing me like a door, a sleeve of barnacles. Imagine an underbelly of hungry, one-eyed zooplankton, tempura paint crustacea gazing Malocchio out onto Botticelli's wrists, their own Mediterraneans pulsing, and what aphrodisia brewed there unrealized. Emily S. in magic marker on a bathroom stall writing, "My name then is a lesbian," before I knew the nature of my desire, or why I was dressing up. My costume jewelry shimmering like calves of docks, and even now in cosmic tubs, my ghost mouths open. Thank you so much.
Oh, Sarah, excellent. Let's give a huge round of applause for Sarah. Another round of applause for Hannah, all together now. Great. And we are at the question and answer session of Salon 5. So feel free to unmute yourselves, chime in with whatever questions you have. I know I have a few, but I will, of course, let others go before me and we'll get the ball rolling. Who would like to ask a question of these two wonderful poets this evening? Or I can get the ball rolling. There was a line, Sarah, materiality of balm, and then you had the A-frame halo, and the fact that you had a poem in the shape of a cootie catcher, and that you had the little smell-o-vision in league with polyester. Thought a lot about tactility in your work. And then I'm also thinking to Hannah's poetry, I can imagine as a mother with a young child, they're just learning the world through all the senses. But I would imagine touch is probably way up there on the sense list. And I was wondering if Sarah and Hannah, if you could both, let's say, if you were to give advice to writers about incorporating tactility or just about the tactility of poetry, what would you say?
I can go unless you feel like you want to jump in.
You're good. You can go.
Okay. I think something especially like after grad school, I've been thinking about a lot is like, how can I write poetry that feels like it's still grounded in lived life and in our aliveness? Because I think it's so easy when you're in academia to be like up here all the time. And I think like a really easy way to do that is to return to the senses, is like to get back to basics and connect to the body as much as you can. I would like to think that like the work we do on the page, it affects how we show up in our relationships and like the kinds of people that we are. It's not like going to solve anything, but I think it shouldn't be disconnected. So when I'm thinking of tactility, I'm thinking of presence in the body mostly. Um, so if you're feeling stuck, it's a good place to start to generate writing is to just turn back to your senses. But I also think um, if you're feeling a little like it's really easy to feel numb right now, it's really easy to want to distance yourself from the things that are happening around us. And I think that like tactility is this like it is that it can bring immediacy back to your poems. It can bring urgency back to your poems, and it gets you out of that. Let me do some academic flips, in which I'm prone to do. But yeah, that would be my first thought.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then just to kind of in the same vein, I would say write about what you truly care about. Like, who are you? What what do you care about? Write about that because that's what you know, um, is where your passion is. And then also for me, like it's strange, but I have like voice to text and like if I just like feel something, maybe like my daughter said, or maybe like I'm walking down the street and there's like a stray dog or whatever, then I just take out my phone, and voice to text, and then I just say the line that I thought of in my head. That way it's very like organic, like you're not trying to like recreate the emotion or like the feeling. Um, because you get it down right away. And you don't need to have a whole poem in that moment, but if you just come across a line that can inspire a whole poem later, then that's been really helpful for me.
I wondered if I could sort of continuing that line of thinking, ask you both um, a little bit about perspective in your work and how you work with that and edit that, right? Like, um, you know, in in your mother poems, you're often looking outward at this little other
Mm,
who's there, and I mean, there's something and developing images off sort of childhood experiences, right? That line that John pointed to, the yoga happening on the back of
mm,
the dragon's claws. And Sarah, I feel like your work is so tactile and also while it's both tactile, it's also very internal, right? Of the fantasy of the window and the condensation. And I wonder if that's about sort of organically happening because of the different periods of your lives that you're in, or if that has to do more with a certain kind of framing for the books that you're writing and how that's building, or if you chose to read pieces that just sort of played off of each other in the like children and how we get them, or what have you. I'm blathering, but
mm.
uh,
Um, I would say, unless Sarah, you want to go. Good. Okay. So based on perspective, do you mean just like how we choose what perspective we want to put in our poems? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, and the kind of angle of the poem that you're taking.
I understand. Okay. So I would say from the angle is like what's happening in the moment. So again, like I said, if I think of something, I write it down right away. But then I also try and take like a step back after something happens and I say like if I were to explain this in a way that's funny or like lighthearted to my friend, or if I'm being honest in a conversation to my friend, how would I say that? And so I try to keep true to that tone, because I wanted my poetry to be very accessible for people. Not everyone who Not a lot of people like to read poetry, and so I wanted to reach a greater audience through that. So it's having a very casual voice and perspective. And then again, for like the dragon part, and then there's like a couple of pieces with like a unicorn that's in the woods. I wanted to also tap into that childlike imagery to have some of their perspective in there as well to kind of sew into the parent one as well to create kind of a more complete picture. And so I'm a character in my poems, and then my daughter is a character. So I wanted to bring in some of the things that she's seeing. I also bring in like a couple that I see at the park with their daughter. I bring in the dragon. So just anyone who's involved in the poems is where I try to incorporate what they could be seeing or sensing.
I really appreciate this question because I like, so this book came out last spring, my little chat book that I'm reading from. It came out last spring, and I had written most of the poems in grad school between like 2021 and 2023. And so I feel like I have a little bit of distance from it now. And I think a lot of these poems were written like after this like series of like big difficult events in my life. And I feel like I don't want to say they were reactionary because it was like a little more thought out than that, but like they were all in response to this thing that happened. And it was very clear in my head that I was like, there's who I was before this happened, and then there's who I am now. And I like don't know how to reconcile the two. And so I think a lot of the poems are trying to build a new understanding of myself or trying to connect back to that person I was before. So it was actually interesting. Like I kind of wasn't like it's such a like erotic book. I like wouldn't think of it as being like, oh, hearing from my child self all the time. But a couple of the poems I read after hearing Hannah's poems, I was like, oh, this is like young Sara Mae. And I think that's because it was me trying to be in communion with that past self that felt truer to me than like me sort of feeling lost in figuring out gender things and figuring out who I am like sort of like in the aftermath of like the terrible things that happened. Um and I was like thinking out this response as you were asking it, and I was like, okay, isn't every poem like a response to something that happens? But I don't actually think that that's necessarily true. Like the poems I want to be writing that I'm like in this next chapter is like I want to write like poems imagining our future. Like what an important thing to be doing is like imagining a better future for ourselves in our poems. That's what the surrealists I think were sometimes doing, and like um, so I don't know. I guess perspective wise, I was also just like studying a lot of fairy tales when I was writing these poems, and reading a lot of speculative fiction and watching a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I feel like I'm thinking about like characters I love, and I think that was also helpful for me because when it was so uncomfortable to like be in my own story, I could sort of like find resonances in other people's. So
Yeah, thank you both for that. If I can ask a bonus question to Hannah, um, if you were going to strike a child in the throat, what type of is it judo? Is it karate? How would you do it?
Yeah, I do Muay Thai, and so I think a direct teep, which is just like a front kick to the throat, would probably be the most useful in that situation. Launch them to the moon.
I have a question. I think you both are interested in pieces that add up to a whole slash pieces that stand for something. I'm thinking like I really loved Daggerhorn from Hannah because the dagger is not the horn, but the dagger is the horn. Like they're two different things. Like one thing for another, or one thing is another. Such as Sarah's "You a Chimney, Me a Sky, Collecting Smoke." Um, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, do you think a poem is an equation of some sort? And if so, do you think it needs to balance in some manner? And you can answer this, I'm thinking of like weight on the page, how the poem looks, um, meaning, however you choose.
I think for me, it's somewhat of an equation, because you do want to have a balance of like imagery, but then you also want to have a balance of anchoring so that your readers aren't too far off and confused. You also want it to look nice on the page as well. So there is an equation to it, but I think that that equation varies too from person to person. Um, my poetry is different than the amazing Sarah's poetry. We probably use different equations, but it doesn't mean that we don't have an awesome outcome, awesome product at the end. But I do think that there is some very like basic skills that help make your poems shine. Sarah, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like as you were talking, I was like, we use different equations, but we land, but maybe we find the same number at the end, you know? But definitely agree with everything that you're saying. I think my mind went to thinking about like the turn in a poem or like the volta. If you're looking at like a sonnet form, the volta is like that moment of transformation in the poem where like something shifts, and it's usually around like the eighth or ninth line of a sonnet. And I came up in slam poetry, and so in slam we're always talking about the turn. And so you're sort of like there's all this momentum, and you have like you sort of like you disarm the audience and with like a little anecdote, and then there's like you're sort of like chugging along in the narrative arc of the poem. Maybe you're developing a conceit of some kind. You're like the audience is getting familiar with your world of imagery, and then you flip the concept on its face, and like that's the turn. Um, and I feel like I do arrive. I like it's a lot of pressure that one puts on themselves, but I'm like, yeah, I go to the page because I'm looking for that moment of transformation. Like I'm looking to leave with having surprised myself, and like I want to find something that like I didn't know when I first sat down to write. Like I want to see what gets revealed. So I think if there's like an equation for me, it's like stumbling around in the dark until I like find what that thing is. Um, I feel like there's that like tweet, or I think it was a tweet from either Chen Chen or Franny Choi, but they were like, every time I sit down to write a poem, it's completely mysterious to me how I've ever written a poem before. Um, and I think that's like a beautiful, sacred mysteriousness that like we poets get to kind of like sit in, and I don't think many other professions or people really get to do. So
I have another question. I think that there's time for it, and that if anyone else, of course, wants to jump in, but you can't see it. I'm wearing my invisible librarian thinking cap right now, and as I've got all my little library kind of books written down for this, and when I look at the title of Hannah's forthcoming book, we've got the milk and the mess before the magic. And then, Sarah, you talk about writing in terms of body horror. And this happens to be the week that I'm teaching Octavia E. Butler's Blood Child, which has a very visceral male giving birth to alien larval grub eating species scene in it. Spoiler alert. And in the past, I've taught Eight Bites by Carmen Maria Machado from Her Body and Other Parties. And there's also that story, The Husband Stitch. And then I even go back further into the older repertoire, and I'm thinking of The Bell Jar by Plath. And you have, for me, and when I remember taught it last year, I literally got goosebumps when I got to the scene where Valerie shows the lobotomy scars. And And then now I'm thinking about poets and body horror, and I've got Brandy George. She wrote a collection called Gog in 2016. And it's pretty horrific if you think about the fact that most of the poems are about a teenage girl who's given a small town exorcism in kind of Podunk, Michigan. And there's also the cyborg Jillian Wise, who's written about the way people online want to fetishize the disabled. And in terms of other poets or fiction writers or memoirists who bring body horror front and foremost, Sarah and Hannah, I'm wondering if you have any reading recommendations or could speak more to the body horror aspects.
Well, first of all, I want that reading list. So I hope you can follow up and send it afterwards. But um, I, I mean, I'm trying to think what I was reading when I was writing a lot of these poems. I'm obsessed with Mariana Enriquez right now, and I feel like she's also um, I'm trying to figure I'm working on a novel right now, and I love that it somehow feels easier for me, maybe just because it's long form, but it's like I get to do all the things I love to do in poetry line wise, like on a line level. But I feel like it's connecting out further, and it's like there's more room to feel like you're in the world, and I'm connecting it to like historical fiction and stuff. And I love Mariana Enriquez because it's like all these like fantastical allegories for like the history of Argentina. Our Share of Night is like maybe my favorite book ever, and it is like absolutely horrific and terrifying to read. It is so good. And there's something very satisfying about like carrying that big tome around. Um, I'm trying to think who else. I mean, I feel like Dorothea Lasky writes really viscerally sometimes. Like she can kind of like dip into the abstract and then all of a sudden you're like really painfully aware of what she's talking about. And I mean, she has that book that's about The Shining, um, that I think is really, it's called The Shining or just Shining. I can't remember, but it's really, really good. Um, Let me look back at my list and I'm going to drop some in the chat also.
I put some of those in the chat too. And I would also add Thomas Muir E. Lopez. I think it's called The Book of Resting Places. And there's an essay, it's essays on how we as a society think about death and how we treat our dead. And he's got an essay in there. He actually visited a cryogenic preservation facility. And of course, it would be in Arizona, the warmest place in America, but that's where some of the heads get, cryogenically preserved. And I just remember reading that essay and feeling a little bit horrific, but also there is that possibility that they could be revived. And that it's just kind of horrific to think that you could just have this head in a freezer somewhere waiting for that perfect scientific breakthrough to then unthaw and be reanimated.
Yeah, so I guess for me, my question is very focused on being real with people about, like how parenthood is great, but also like it's not good sometimes. Actually, a lot of times it's very stressful. And so in that, weird things happen to your body when you're pregnant and after you have a baby. And so let's not hold back on that. Like why are we shush shush about it if it's something that's real? Postpartum depression. I mean, you're breastfeeding, your nipples bleed because the baby, that's just what happens, is bite on your nipples so hard that they start to bleed and they crack. And it's very, very painful. Um, Not to get too gory, but I mean, you have afterbirth that lasts for a while. And so, um, again, it's like, why are we so quiet about these things? This is a natural thing and it's very, very scary. Because you don't feel like you're in charge of your body because a lot of times you're not. And so, yeah, it makes people uncomfortable, but like, let's do it. Let's do that. Lean into it. And then, so, I mean, the human body is a crazy thing. So,
Indeed, it is.
mm-hmm.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, Matthew, Adam, anything? Or anyone else? Let's give an amazing, thunderous, so loud you can hear it from every corner of the country we're in, round of applause to our readers. Congrats. And thank you all for coming this evening. This has been a wonderful reignition of the Salon Reading Series. I will put in a plug for Sunday, March 1st. If you love fairy tales, Salon 6 will feature founding editor of Fairy Tale Review, Kate Bernheimer, and Amy Bender, who is also one of the queen of fantasy and fairy tale-esque and modern day myths. They will be reading at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Standard Central Time on Sunday, March 1st. And in the chat, we have links to where you can order Sarah's work, and also Hannah's book will be coming out before Mother's Day. And with social media, we'll put in some plugs for that. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week ahead of you, and more poetry, more power to the world with poetry.
Thanks so
Bye.
much, y'all.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks for having
you.
us.